Good afternoon. I'll call to order this meeting of the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee. My name is Cam Gordon. I'm chair of the committee, and today I'm joined by council members Cano, Glidden, Andrew Johnson, Lisa Bender, and Jacob Fry. All committee members are here. It's good to see you all. We have maybe a shorter meeting than last time today, but we do have 4 items on our agenda. We have 1 consent item and 3 discussion items. I'll move the consent item first, and this is from the Health Department. It's acceptance of a grant from Medical Research Institute to help us do some needs assessment of communities experiencing racial ethnic disparities in childhood asthma for the amount not to exceed $50,000. Are there any discussion on that consent item? Seeing none, then I will move that for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. Now we have 3 discussion items before us, some interesting topics. We're going to start with our Minneapolis commercial building energy benchmarking policy, and this is our 3rd annual report. I think that all council members have probably got a copy of the benchmarking report. Maybe not, but there are some available, and it's also online. And now we'll get a report from staff. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Chair and City Council. So my name is Katie Jones-Schmidt. I'm with the Center for Energy and Environment, and I'm embedded here at in the Sustainability Office working on the Energy Benchmarking Program. Also, Patrick Hanlon will be joining me in talking about this topic. So to get started, we're going to be going through some of the background of this policy. We'll talk about the results of the 3rd year of the Energy Benchmarking Program, and then we'll talk about the next steps. So as you know, energy benchmarking is essentially energy tracking. So if you're familiar with the Energy Guide or the Energy Star certification on appliances, it's essentially what we're doing with buildings, as you can see here in this picture. It is the ongoing review of building energy performance to ensure the building is using energy as expected with regard to normal operations and with regard to improvements. So as a building has had improvements done, it helps building managers verify that the improvements made were as expected. So the program has 4 important goals. We wanted to understand our large commercial building market. I want to identify buildings with potential for energy savings. We also want to help buildings manage their energy expenses, and we want to show progress towards the city's climate action goals. Energy benchmarking policy is not unique to Minneapolis. It's also throughout the country. There are 14 other cities that have benchmarking, 1 county, and 2 states that have benchmarking policies. And now I'll turn it over to Patrick, who will talk about the schedule.
Chair Gordon, council members, my name is Patrick Hanlon. I'm the Environmental Initiatives Manager for the City of Minneapolis Health Department. It's an honor to be up here today talking about energy efficiency and the role that it plays in climate change, public health, in terms of both direct and indirect pollution. You'll have to excuse me, I'm standing in for Nadia Khan, who runs the operational aspects of our energy benchmarking program, as she has coursework this week going towards her Certified Energy Manager certification. I also apologize, as I may have to leave immediately after this because I need to catch a flight to Washington, D.C., and coincidentally it's for an Energy Smart conference in D.C. to talk about meeting with national leaders in energy efficiency and what we can do to drive change here in Minneapolis. So hoping to learn a little bit out there. And as a side note, that's on my own dime. The first slide that we have, or this slide that I'm going over here, is the timeline for the energy benchmarking program. We started in 2013 with our public buildings. And as of right now, we're at 100% compliance with all those buildings. And I'd like to give a special thank you to our own energy champion Brian Milberg here at the City of Minneapolis, Jennifer Ringgold with the Minneapolis Park Board, David Opian with the Minneapolis Public Schools, and Leah Heinecker with Hennepin County for the work that they've done in 100% of their buildings, and then some, even buildings that aren't required with this ordinance they've submitted data on. As of right now, the 2 red highlighted areas that you see in 2015, those are private buildings over 100,000 square feet And then buildings that are 50,000 to 100,000 square feet, we're not disclosing those publicly for individual businesses or individual buildings, but we'll have aggregate data for those buildings that are in the report this year. And then going forward in 2016, this year, when we give this report next year, it'll be all of the buildings that are under this program, and you'll be able to see individual data on all of those buildings.
So this is the first year that we're having the information on the private buildings?
Correct, that over 100,000 square foot building class.
Okay, so that's a big news scoop for all our
Yes.
media.
And to give a little background, the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool, that's the tool that all the building owners and managers are submitting on and using to submit their energy data. Thank you. I'm following on this. That's the tool that they're all submitting their data on. And I use it's the equivalent of, you have Energy Star scores for appliances, for refrigerators. This is giving an Energy Star score for buildings, for large commercial properties. So it's a rating system, and it's a way that we can compare apples to apples with other cities that are doing this program, with the Big Apple, with New York City, with Austin, with San Francisco, and so that we can compare those scores that we have for Minneapolis buildings with those other cities, and it normalizes for weather, so we're not at a disadvantage being in a cold weather climate. The data collection process is building managers enter their data into Portfolio Manager. They have their own account where they enter their own information. The city of Minneapolis, they then submit their information to the city of Minneapolis through a link, and we have our own account. And all the information that's non-proprietary related to their business that relates to our energy program is submitted to the city of Minneapolis. We have a program here that was developed by the Retired Environmental Technical Assistance Program. As we switched from Kiva to ELMS, a new land management system, they helped us develop a system for accounting and keeping track of data. So we have an automatic feedback system where we can, if building owners give inaccurate data, we're able to give them automatic feedback so that they can know that their scores need to be adjusted and accurate information needs to be submitted. And that accuracy is very important, because if we don't have accurate information, that's the whole point of this program, is to know where we stand with energy use in the city and where individual buildings stand with their energy use. This program, thank you. This program is one of the main focuses when we came out with the program is to ensure that building owners and managers, that this is as easy as possible to submit their data, to submit accurate data to the city. And some of the steps that we've taken to do that is we partnered with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency in offering workshops to building owners and managers. The Center for Energy and Environment, Katie and Jenny Edwards with the Center for Energy and Environment put out workshops for building owners and managers so that they understood how to use this tool. They also set up a helpline so that if anyone had questions and needed technical assistance, that we were there to offer that technical assistance. And if there were building owners that needed even more assistance, there's some building owners that have building managers and are pretty aware of their energy use at each building. If there were building owners that didn't have that sort of assistance in their building, we worked with their Retired Engineers Technical Assistance Program so that they could do on-site visits with the building owners and managers. So offering assistance and offering tools to business owners was a huge component of moving forward with this ordinance, and Councilmember Glidden was a big champion of taking that stance and really making sure that we had assistance for building owners when we came out with the program. I think it's back to you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now we're moving into my favorite part, the results. So this, the results that one of the goals that we started off with was to understand our large commercial building market. So we analyzed 429 buildings. Of those, 258 of them were private buildings and 171 of them were public buildings, which came from the city of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, Minneapolis Public Schools, and Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. When we look at those buildings by property type and by their count, 25% of those buildings were offices, 17% were K through 12 schools, 10% were parking, and the rest were smaller increments. When we look at this by area, however, Almost 40% of the benchmarked area is offices, which makes sense because our largest commercial buildings are mostly the downtown office buildings. That is followed then by 15% of the benchmarked area is parking, followed by K through 12 schools at 9%.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
The remaining types is a fairly big group. What can you give some examples of what's remaining that isn't fitting in a big enough slice?
Yes, so those remaining types each have less than 3%. And they're things like courthouse or fire station or police station or specialty medical office. So very niche building types.
Okay, thank you.
So some of the context of this is that the benchmark buildings represent 50% of all the commercial building space in the city. That's huge. And these buildings are located throughout the city. You'll notice there is a large concentration downtown, especially of the private buildings, and the public buildings are more dispersed throughout the city, which makes sense because there are lots of, or pretty much every neighborhood has a local park or school. So getting into the energy performance, the Energy Star score is one of the main metrics that we use. It is a metric that ranges from 1 to 100, 1 being the least efficient, 100 being the most efficient, with 50 being the national median. The score for our buildings that could earn an Energy Star score was 74. 68 was the public building median score, and 78 was the median for the private buildings. To note, this is great. The majority of our buildings are performing better than the national median, and this is actually common to what the other cities have been seeing as well. And the theory is that the largest commercial buildings are mostly in those downtown nodes, and there's a lot of competition to maintain or reduce operating costs, and so that improves energy performance, as well as those large commercial buildings typically have a dedicated facilities manager or energy manager, which really helps to make sure that the building runs smoothly. Looking at the response rate, I just want to mention that this is a little bit different than what Patrick mentioned, because this is data from August 31st, 2015, which was the deadline for our the data to be reported onto the website. So all of this data is from this deadline. So a response is either a submission or an exemption. 89% of the buildings that were required to submit data did so. 11% were exempt, and those exemptions can be things like they had less than 50% occupancy, they've been in existence for less than 2 years, or they have financial hardship. Only 10% provided no response. So as a recap, we benchmarked 429 buildings, representing 50% of the commercial building space. They performed pretty well with an Energy Star score of 74, and we had a really high response rate, which we're pretty proud of. So the second goal that I had mentioned previously was to identify potential savings. So if we look at a median building from our data set of 120,000 square feet, and that building were to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions 15%, it could save $52,000 annually. If we scale that up, that would be $24 million annually that the buildings would be saving and would not be going to the utilities. In order to do that, we have to find individual buildings that have potential for savings. So we've identified property types that have the largest opportunity for savings. Those include hospitals, hotels, worship facilities, public schools, and some individual offices. And all of this information is publicly available, listed out building by building on our website. The last goal that I had mentioned at the beginning was that we want to show progress. So we've been benchmarking our public buildings for 3 years now. And looking at the average weather normalized EUI, which is energy use per square foot, we've seen about a 7% reduction in overall average weather normalized EUI, which is in line with other studies that the EPA portfolio manager has done, and so that means we're making progress as we're expected to make progress, which is good. So we're also celebrating successes as we are trying to push buildings towards doing better. In October, we had the Building Energy Performance Awards and recognized 6 buildings in 3 categories. So those categories being business, and then community/education, and hospitality/recreation. So we have a diversity of buildings that are doing well in our city, and we wanted to give them a pat on the back for doing so. I just want to highlight Broadway Place West. They are absolutely excellent. They loved the fact that they were recognized, and they actually requested a second plaque because they were so excited.
Can I just ask, the 33 South 6th, is that an office building?
Yes, it's a downtown office building. The buildings so in Portfolio Manager, they name their buildings, and that's what they named their building.
Thank you.
The program is also being recognized for its successes. The Minnesota Environmental Initiative has recognized the program as a finalist for its awards, and those will be determined in May. And then the Metro has been recognized nationally as having the 13th most number of Energy Star certified buildings. So we're amongst friends here in the Metro. So let's talk about the exciting part of next steps. As Patrick mentioned, we are getting a new benchmarking management system, and that's helping us be much more effective and efficient in our compliance tracking, and that has helped inform the development of ELMS. So ELMS is being much more customized to help us be effective. Xcel Energy has developed a benchmarking tool that is essentially an automatic data transfer. So in the past, buildings have had to enter data manually or do a copy and paste from a spreadsheet. They've had to go into the system. Now there's just that automatic data transfer from Excel systems to Portfolio Manager, which makes it so much easier on the buildings and removing a barrier. And lastly, we'll talk about the 3 initiatives. So the Minneapolis Building Energy Challenge is a challenge for all commercial buildings to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 15% by 2020. We have 15 buildings sign up, and we want to get more. This 15% reduction is in line with the city's climate action plan goals of a 20% reduction for commercial buildings by 2025. The city also has grants for Energy Star certification. So certification itself is free, but it does require a professional engineer to do a site visit. So that site visit is about $800, and so the city would provide $500 towards that site visit. Certification is great because it shows that a building is high performing and can be recognized by tenants that are wanting to look for energy efficient spaces, and that gives them that credibility. And I'll lastly pass it over to Patrick.
Another initiative that we're looking at, and we're running a pilot this year, is looking at the cost share concept that we've been using for air quality, and using that concept for energy efficiency. Energy efficiency has a little bit more of a return in most cases, and so the match is not quite as much, but it's a way to drive changes through incentives by matching some of the incentives that are offered by Xcel and bringing those resources into Minneapolis and driving them towards the buildings that we're benchmarking. And that's all we have.
I do want to recognize our many partners in this program. So obviously the City of Minneapolis with the Sustainability Office and Environmental Health, the Center for Energy and Environment, the Retired Engineers Technical Assistance Program. Funding has come from the McKnight and Energy Foundations, as well as from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency.
Very good. I think we might have some questions. I know I have a question. Councilmember Glidden, do you have a comment or a question?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I actually don't have a question, but just a couple comments. I just wanted to thank the staff for putting together such a great presentation that was easy to understand for those who aren't into the energy benchmarking data itself, but to get a good big picture view of what's happening. I think this program has ended up being so successful, and it's really been, I think, because of incorporating recommendations that have come to the city, getting together some great partnerships, working closely with the building community. And, I return to the statistic on the response rate of over 90%, and just think that is huge. And especially knowing that this was the year where we're incorporating the data from the 50,000 square feet and up buildings. These are the buildings that are really kind of your more individual type owners who may not have big portfolios, who may not have lots of staff, and to find that they were able to to figure out how to make this program work and hopefully start to get some information that helps them make their buildings more energy efficient. I mean, that's the whole goal. So just want to say thank you, and that I think, again, the fact that we've had investment from some funders to help us understand how we can make our program better really kind of speaks to the worth of what's happening here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Councilmember Glidden especially for helping to get this started and bringing it up and getting it passed. I think this is really significant. It's really exciting work too. And it's exciting each year as we learn about a new sector kind of and how we're doing and how we're not doing. I was curious about the response rate. 90% is great. Although if you look at the slides, you also notice there was 11% exempt. So it means we're even further than actually 100%. It's more like 79%, I guess, that we're actually catching. So could you just tell us what we're doing when there's no response and maybe why or how buildings are exempted from having to do this?
Yeah, Chair Gordon. So the buildings that had no response that I showed in the slide, many of them actually have complied. Nadia Khan, who is in the back there, she has been so dedicated at contacting them and going after. She's even done, building visits to make sure that they know about the program and that they do comply, and that if they need technical assistance, then they are routed to the Center for Energy and Environment. And from that work, we now have 100% compliance on the largest commercial buildings.
Okay.
On those mid-sized buildings, we are higher than what it was shown in that slide. But we're still working on trying to get to those individual building owners because, as you mentioned, they have less capacity, and so it takes a little bit more help and time to get to them.
That means that the 10% no response has now been changed to 0% no response. Does that make sense? Or are you just talking about the biggest buildings?
Biggest buildings.
Okay.
Sorry. And there's also an enforcement process that comes into play now. The first year that building owners were required to submit was a grace period. And so there was no enforcement. They'd receive a violation letter if they didn't report their data. But now all of these buildings are in, if there are buildings that don't report their energy use, it's in an enforcement. So they'd get a violation letter and then they'd follow our standard enforcement protocol with violations and then citations.
And how do buildings get an exemption? What's the exempt portion? What does that mean?
So buildings that have less than 50% occupancy do not have to comply, just because the building is not going to be used in the same way and therefore can't really be compared with that Energy Star ranking. The same thing with buildings that are less than 2% or 2 years old. There's so much weird so much weird commissioning that has to happen as the occupants in the building start working with the systems that are in the building, that those have to, balance out for a couple of years before we can really start benchmarking those buildings.
Okay, thank you. I understand that. Is there anybody here from the Retired Engineers Technical Assistance Program?
I don't think
if there were someone here, I think we'd have to give them a real special thank you. I don't think that we could have rolled this out the way that we have. It couldn't have been this successful, and there's so much learning that individual property owners would have done that I think it's my understanding of it, and you're much closer to it than I am, but this has been a major contribution. And so I think we should all be very grateful for that. And I don't see any other questions or comments, so we'll also express our gratitude for the presentation and the report, and more information online and also in the benchmarking report that you provided us. Thank you so much for that. And I will move to receive and file this report and presentation. No discussion on that. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And now we'll go on to our second exciting discussion item on our agenda. This is our annual presentation and report from our homegrown Minneapolis Food Council. And give them a moment to get set up. I think I saw our co-chairs here as well as our staff coordinator. All right. Take it away with whoever is your first act. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and City Council members. I'm Tamara Downs-Schwei, Homegrown Minneapolis and Local Food Policy Coordinator for the city and staff for the Food Council, and honored to be here today with our two esteemed co-chairs to present to you our annual report on our work. As you know, Homegrown is a citywide initiative working to help improve the community's ability to grow, process, distribute, eat, and compost healthy, sustainable, and locally grown food, bringing together key partners from across the city and across the food system to do this important work. We are now in the third phase of the Homegrown Minneapolis initiative, which started with the formation of the Food Council. This Food Council is a unique co-ownership model that is comprised of both city and community members, which you a year ago increased with a resolution to 25 members, the addition of 4 members representing the Park and Rec Board and public schools now in the group. We have our third ever cohort of the Food Council that began its work in January 2016 and is already hard at work planning its new priorities. The Food Council does its work with a well thought out vision that was developed when the Food Council formed. And in addition, it uses some really bold strategies to achieve both that vision and its mission. We are very fortunate to have a diverse representation on the Food Council of many community members and many parts of the food system, from cooperatives to chefs and restaurateurs, growers, composters, funders, educators, incubator kitchens. We have so many wonderful active volunteer members who are putting in many hours on behalf of our initiative. We also, in this important work, have representatives from the city and 6 city representatives, as well as the Park and Rec Board member who oversees the Urban Ag Implementation Plan, and a public schools member who oversees the Farm to School program. While we only have the 1 city council member on the committee, we've been really honored to partner with all of the city council members on this work, as well as many, many city staff from nearly every city department as well to make the work happen. And we do have a new growing partnership as well with the many state level partners as well, including the Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Grown Program, and hot off the press, I will distribute to you later. We got our new Homegrown Minneapolis edition of the Minnesota Grown Directory, which just arrived today with a back cover showcasing our farmers markets and an inside cover showcasing the Homegrown Minneapolis initiative. So excited to work together with many different partners to keep the important work going and growing. So with that, I am excited to introduce to you our Food Council co-chair, Devon Nolan, who will share some more highlights with you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tamara and Mr. Chair and City Council members. I'm Devon Nolan, and I'm honored to serve as the co-chair for the Food Council. Local food efforts in our city include growing, processing, distributing, eating, and composting as we work toward a local sustainable food system. I will provide some highlights of the dynamic areas that we've had activities happening. First, growing. Our community is growing food in many ways and places. We now have more than 275 community gardens, including more than 50 on city-owned lots through the Garden Lease program with CPED. We have nearly 20 outdoor and indoor urban farms growing vegetables, mushrooms, fish, honey, and more. We're raising backyard animals. More than 265 chicken permits, more than 80 permitted beehives, as well as several aquaponics projects. Processing. Food processing is one of the most quickly growing areas of the local food economy, as well as an area of great growth opportunity for food business entrepreneurs. We now have more than 95 food trucks. We have 3 licensed incubator kitchens, including Kindred Kitchen, Kitchen in the Market, and City Food Studio, supporting a range of exciting food businesses. Distributing increases access and expanding demand for healthy, locally grown foods. We have an expansive, growing distribution system. About 40 farmers markets, mini markets, and farm stands operated throughout the city. Numerous community-supported agriculture distribution points and farms. The city became a CSA site, hosting a CSA for employees and partnerships with 3 local farms. Eating and health. The reason why we all do this, to eat healthy, good food, and to make sure everyone of all ages and income ranges has access to good, affordable foods. because in the end, we all ultimately want the same thing. Increasing access in part through our EBT at farmers markets, where nearly all Minneapolis farmers markets accept food support or SNAP or EBT benefits in 2015, which also translates into increased income for our food business entrepreneurs. The updated staple food ordinance took effect this past year, and most of the qualifying licensed grocery stores are compliant or on their way to being compliant soon. We're also developing healthy food policies in city buildings and parks in partnership with MPRB to increase accessibility of healthy foods and reduce consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. And lastly, composting, keeping nutrients in the neighborhoods. The city continues to make exciting progress with composting and organics recycling. Community members are replenishing soil fertility, reducing food waste, and completing the cycle with our food. Many residents are participating in the new organics recycling program, and I personally was excited to see my new bin arrive, and my children were really excited about those green bags and how to use them. So I'm hoping to raise the next generation of good stewards. Some of us are doing backyard composting and commercial composting. Last year, 71 community gardens incorporated more than 600 cubic yards of compost into their gardens through the city's free reduced price compost program. At Homegrown, we participate in city-level advocacy as well, obviously. We had another successful year in food systems accomplishments. We supported passage of the pollinator-friendly city resolution, limiting pesticides use on city property. The community garden program was updated, allowing lease of city lots for market gardens and urban farms in addition to community gardens. 43 new vacant city parcels for garden lease. We reduced fees and enacted pollinator protection for city lease lots. We support an expansion of the allowable size of compost piles in backyards, community gardens, market gardens, and urban farm lots. We updated the food trucks ordinance, reducing fees and permitting for food trucks at farmers markets, as well as updated rules for chickens and other fowl products, removing barriers by eliminating neighbor signature requirement for 6 birds or less. And I also had the pleasure of representing our city this past September in Washington, D.C. through a partnership I have with the Union of Concerned Scientists, where we have delegates from 5 cities, including Louisville, Baltimore, Memphis, Oakland, and we had what I call the federal government marathon, where we were at the USDA, the White House, and Capitol Hill all in one day. And so this work strategically aligns as well with the Minnesota Food Charter strategies that we've seen, and so we'll continue to make strides toward creating this local, sustainable, fair, and just food system in our city. And to tell you more about our work of our Food Council, Co-Chair Russ Henry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Gordon and council members. I'm Russ Henry. I'm co-chair of the Homegrown Minneapolis Food Council, and it's an honor to have been elected by the Food Council to serve as chair for another term. In addition to the city-level work that Devon explained, we're working on some important state-level advocacy. State legislation increasing the maximum sales for cottage food producers. We worked also on state legislation amending the Minnesota seed law, making it legal for seed libraries to operate, as well as for individuals to share seeds with each other. It's hard to believe that was ever illegal. Let's see. Thanks. Some of our most important and exciting work involves community engagement. This year, we recruited a fantastic and diverse new food council cohort, our most diverse food council cohort yet. We've tabled and made presentations at many, many community events, and we sent out our monthly Homegrown Minneapolis newsletter, e-newsletter, to over 2,400 individuals. Let's see, our open house. I hope all of you were, I believe most of you were at our open house, and I hope all of you can attend again. It's an early invitation, but put it on your calendar for December this year. We, at the last one, had 275 community members come out. It was a very exciting event in December. We presented 5 Homegrown Minneapolis Hero Awards to community food activists and entrepreneurs, including to Adam Pruitt and Demetria Fuller of Brightside Produce, Christina Elias of Good Juju and Muskogee Gardens, Latasia Powell from Appetite for Change, Pollinate Minnesota and Bee's Knees, and Project Sweetie Pie's Green with Envy project. So we're just forming, like I said, our new food council for this year, and as such, we're forming priorities with all the new food council members. Very exciting new priorities that food council members want to work on this term and these coming 2 years. Farmers markets, healthy food access, land access with a emphasis on land tenure, local food business innovations, local food procurement, parks and food, soil health, one of my favorite topics, youth and food education, and community outreach and engagement. We're also participating in potential task force focused on updating the food cart ordinance as well as the food shelves ordinances. So we do have some official recommendations from the Homegrown Minneapolis Food Council for the City Council, and I've brought those today to share with you. The Food Council officially recommends the addition of a statement on the city's federal legislative agenda in support of GMO labeling and in opposition of the federal preemption. The DARK Act that has been moving through the Senate, this is a response to that, and we're trying to say, please do not preempt states like Vermont has done from labeling their genetically modified foods. Our next recommendation for council action, the Food Council recommends amending the community garden policy and commercial garden policy to remove a small but kind of troubling phrase in there regarding soil testing. The phrase is "at no cost to the city." This would allow the city to conduct soil tests on lots in the garden lease program that have not yet been tested. And I've got some numbers here for you. Apparently, there are under 20 lots, so maybe 15 or so lots we need to have tested. The cost for testing is around $365 per lot. And then there is a one-time fee of a soil auger that we'll need to get to perform the testing, and that's a $200 and some fee. So we're talking about under $7,000. And of course, we do mandate in policy that we have these lots tested. But when we have this phrase "at no cost to the city," that can be very difficult to get that done. So I'm happy to take questions from council members. We're certainly very grateful for your support in amending the garden lease policy last year. That policy is under review at the Food Council, and we're getting a lot of community feedback around that policy. And I'd be happy to take any questions and I'm sure Devon and Tamara would as well, that the committee might have.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions immediately, but maybe you could stay tuned.
Okay.
Also, if you could, I'd appreciate it if you'd go back to the slide having to do with the recommendation to remove the cost, the cost spending of city money prohibition. Thank you so much, because I would like to take up that recommendation on the committee right here. So I think that everybody should have at least a copy of it. And I was aware that this was coming up, and actually there's a little bit more of a story here. When we passed the commercial garden policy resolution in 2015, I actually had forgotten about the resolution of 2010. And what we're dealing with right now is something that was in the resolution of 2010. So in 2015, we passed the resolution and we wanted to get soil tested for lead. And fortunately enough, for the first year, we were able to find some county money, and actually the public paid for the soil testing. The county didn't have funds they were willing to part with constantly, and more of them, and also were a little bit perplexed when they discovered the city actually was putting no money towards the soil testing that we were asking them to fund. So I talked to the city coordinator and I talked to the CPED director, and they actually both were able to come forward with some funding for it and to cover the gap. But then we also heard back from staff from CPED saying that we prohibited any costs to support these gardens because of the resolution from 2010. So I think it makes complete sense. I think we often do things like this and we take action, and we count on our staff to look at the costs, and there are already certain protections so that staff just can't go out approving and spending over certain amounts of money on supporting these kind of endeavors. And I think if we just removed the cost, it would allow us and them, when there was some funding available, especially for the soil testing issue here, to move forward and provide those kinds of funds. So I'd like to move, maybe before we even receive and file this, I'll move to amend the community garden policy that you have before us, which essentially is to remove the words "at no cost to the city" when we approving that they can go out for leases on city-owned properties. Any discussion on that? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. So I think this is more a question for staff. So what are the parameters that we look at in terms of what cost for lead testing we would be willing to cover, and then what cost we would not be willing to cover?
Yeah, and what we're proposing to do for testing the remaining lots is different from what has been done previously, and it actually would be a tremendous cost savings. We have staff in our environmental health group who would be already working on a contract with the soil testing lab that they have on retainer, and so they've estimated the number of staff hours that would be required to do the analysis, which would get us not just information on lead, but also arsenic and PAHs, which have all been found in some city lots previously tested, and so this would give us enough analysis that we would have information that other types of testing might not provide. If it was found to have above a certain level that's been established, then we do require raised beds still for gardeners. But so that the cost of the $365 per lot includes staff time, and it includes the lab cost for each test.
Okay, so are you saying that by testing it ourselves, we can have we're testing for a wider number of chemicals, and therefore we're saving costs that we would inevitably incur anyway?
What we're doing is previously, when we had the support from Hennepin County to pay directly a consultant, there was a greater cost for the test than what we're able to now incur by working with our own staff.
Okay.
If people were to go and do their own tests, I apologize for the confusion. If people were able to do their own tests, there are some places out there that do testing, and that's come up as what about that option? They don't test as expansively for all the chemicals that might be present. And so people would be missing some really important information about chemicals we know to exist on Minneapolis lots.
Okay, so it's still an increased cost compared to if we had a private individual that was incurring it. It's just less than what it previously would have been. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because a private individual doesn't have access to the same information that we do by using this.
Okay, no, I understand. And does this apply to, would our ability to cover the cost apply to both for-profit as well as community gardens?
That is the recommendation, because we want every gardener to be safe and have information about what's in their lot.
Okay. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Glidden.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're moving here and what it comes from, because I think your discussion about costs actually seems a little bit ahead of the action we're taking as I read this, because it just is saying now that there's not a requirement that the lots would be provided at no cost to the city. So really there's a second decision that would need to be made at some point. This is really just saying that you're now not having that as a requirement. So now it's a decision if the city is able to perform that task or not, and within our budget, right? I'm just asking what you're moving.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not asking what programmatically staff may think they already would like to do as part of their budget, and those are different things. But what's here before us is an amendment to a policy that now is just saying there's not a requirement that the lots would be leased at no cost to the city for these tests or whatever else would be some cost. So that's essentially what you're moving, right?
That's exactly what I'm moving. The anecdote was just descriptive. And of course, even in the anecdote, any decision that the coordinator made to fund this had to fall within their budget and the parameters of their budget and what the council approved. And every year the council is going to be improving the budgets and all the business plans. This isn't asking for any changes to any of that. It's just to take it out of this resolution. So there's some, I guess, a little more flexibility.
And what was this from? Just because, I mean, all I see here is this one piece. So is this part of a bigger policy, or where did this come from? Just so you refresh me on that. So there's a separate ordinance on something, and then there's a resolution on the policy that the council had adopted. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what are we amending. So, because that's not super clear.
Yeah, it isn't super clear because I think this was Resolution 2010 R119, but this actually looks like it may be, if it's an ordinance amendment, that would change it. My,
I would like to make sure I've got the right, like, documents, and I know I don't know if our city attorney saw this before, but just want to make sure that if we have an intention, that we're kind of following through on kind of what's the amendment and.
yeah, how about if we table this just for a second here, and we can, I'll at least remove to receive and file, or we could discuss the other recommendation. And if I wasn't sharing the meeting, I'd go right to the code of ordinances and try to figure out.
I have no objection to the amendment. I just want to make sure.
Right, and I don't want to necessarily be amending an ordinance without doing our due
Yep.
process. Is it your understanding that we're amending a resolution?
Maybe we need to make sure that we've got staff kind of researching what's the right thing we would need to amend.
Yeah, so we might not be able to figure that out this meeting, but we just might, because now a lot of people know what information we're looking for. But why don't we move on to, did you have a comment on this, Councilmember Frye? Well, I'm going to try to still maybe fix it
Okay.
by the end of this meeting.
Okay.
So-
Yeah, then in that case, yes, I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if this amendment is approved, and it looks like it will be, does staff then have to come back to the council at a later time to determine whether costs will be incurred on each respective parcel, or do they have authority to spend up to X amount to do the testing?
That hasn't been specified at this point. I think, as Councilmember Gordon had mentioned, Chair Gordon had mentioned, that within people's departments and available funds, it would be a determination, but it wouldn't be on an individual lot basis. We've been informed by our CPED colleagues that the current policy is prohibiting them from spending available funds currently on lots that are available to be leased, but have a requirement to be tested first. So they were looking at available funds in making that decision.
I actually really like the amendment. I just want to be very clear as to whether we will be spending money on these parcels, or we might be spending money on these parcels, and then staff is going to come back at some time in the future.
I think the understanding was that this would allow staff to proceed with expending the funds on soil testing if the policy was changed. But I apologize, there's not a CPED staff here to affirm that, but that has been the communication we've had.
I just want to make sure that is the case, if that's what we're doing, so that we're just being totally transparent about it.
I think so. Any other questions on that? Well, why don't we just step out of that for a second? And the other recommendation had to do with our legislative agenda. And I understand that's something that is already being looked at by staff and committee members. I actually think it's a great idea, and it should be in our legislative agenda. And so but I'm comfortable right now not necessarily formally referring it there, with kind of the understanding it's something we're working on. And we're fortunate enough to have at our meeting today the chair of the committee that deals with this, the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. And not only is she here, but she'd, I think, like to say something on this. Councilmember Glidden.
Well, because you asked me to.
Thank you.
So, I would just say that, staff is aware of this, that work in the Intergovernmental Relations Department, in part because it's on a public, part of a public meeting and an outline of the work of the Food Council. So they are taking a look at it right now, and we'll kind of review what would be a good format for bringing that forward at some point to the IGR committee. So this would be a consideration of an amendment to our federal legislative agenda, or our federal agenda, excuse me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we discussing the receive and file motion now?
Pardon me?
Are we discussing the receive and file motion now?
We could do that, sure.
I would like to make it.
All right, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Give me the next.
I just wanted to thank the work of our staff and the community members who are part of this group. I think Homegrown Minneapolis is one of the most effective boards and commissions in the city at taking opportunities and barriers and making concrete policy recommendations for approval by the council and other legislative bodies. And I think it's really important work. If you look through all of the different changes that have come through this body, it's really impressive, and it's really making a concrete difference in our food systems and people's day-to-day lives as they have more access to healthy local food. And so I just wanted to thank you for all of your work and again for the effectiveness with which you bring forward these recommendations.
Chair Gordon, Councilmember Bender, thank you very much. It's an absolute delight to have such a supportive city council in doing this work. And I can tell you that a couple of years ago, the work got a lot easier to bring forward work to city council, and it's an absolute pleasure to work with all of you.
Thank you very much. And I'll just note, did you want to? Okay. On the receive and file, I really appreciate the work that the council's been doing, and it's been my honor to be part of that work, and I appreciate that immensely. And I did want to just note that not only are council members welcome to participate in the open house event that happens, but actually as work groups get formed, one of the nice things about the Food Council is the work groups are open to the full community, and we actually have lots of community participation on those work groups. And so it's not just the Food Council doing the work. And I will note also at Food Council meetings, we also have participation of lots of community members. But on those work groups, we also get lots of input and great ideas. And so there's lots of opportunities for council members to plug in and get involved in those areas if they want. And anybody else have any comments on the receiving and file motion? Well, then let's vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And I was able to clarify in terms of the last action that it looked a little confusing because we referred to an ordinance, but that's because the language in the resolution we are amending also referred to that very ordinance. So all we're doing is we're amending the language that was in the resolution. And now the title, as you can see on the screen, resolution 2015 R-459 as follows. And there's a large paragraph there that says that pursuant to the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, Chapter 17, Section 17.60G, the City Council hereby delegates authority to the Community Planning and Economic Development Department Director or designees for the City Department properties to the Public Works Department Director, the City Engineer, or designees for all other city-owned properties to make and execute commercial garden leases pursuant to the commercial garden policy adopted of even date herewith with market gardeners and urban farmers for city-owned properties. And then we're striking at no cost to the city. And then it ends with for a term not to exceed 5 years using a form approved by the city attorney. So we're clear on what we're voting on. Any discussion or question about that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And then I think that concludes your presentation. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate all the good work and being patient with us today during your report.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And now we have one last item that we're going to take up today. Also very, I think, very good work and long in coming. This is the blueprint for equitable engagement. The proposed action was receiving and filing the blueprint for equitable engagement, a 5-year plan to ensure an innovative and equitable engagement system for the city of Minneapolis. And I am interested and have the intention that maybe we can do more than receive and file. This is a 5-year plan about something I think the council cares deeply about. So I had an interest in maybe adopting or approving this plan, but I also recognize that we might not have the time to give it as much attention as we want when we were thinking it was a receive and file. So my plan is actually to receive the presentation today, but then move that we wait 2 cycles and then bring it back. And then with the intention of adopting it as a city council. And hopefully in that 2-cycle delay, it'll give every council member on the committee an opportunity to meet with staff or myself or somebody from the commission and kind of look at this plan and weigh in and put our mark on it if we want to. I will note that at least one council office has come to me expressing an interest in getting more involved in this. And so part of it is not just in response to my own wish to have the council adopt this and endorse it more strongly, but also to be responsive to that. So with that expectation set, now I think we're ready, Mr. Rubendorf, for you to go forward with your presentation. Thank you.
Chair Gordon and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to present this today. As Chair Gordon was framing this up, this is a substantial body of work that we've undertaken for a couple years now, actually several years, working with the community to really co-create a plan about how we are going to ensure that the city and the department's community engagement work is equitable and helps to achieve the One Minneapolis goal. I'm just going to do a quick frame up here, and then Ayanna Kennerly from our office, and then Stacy Sorensen will do the body of the presentation. We also have Araya Fine here, who's one of our creative city-making artists, who will be talking a bit about his work and how it has influenced the creation of this plan. They're going to go over a bit about the process. We used quite an extensive engagement process on this, and I will say, just to kind of cue that up, in that we put out a draft about a year ago and received a lot of feedback saying the draft wasn't right, and so we ended up doing a substantial rewrite before bringing it back again. They're going to go a little bit over the high-level view of what's in the plan, and then also some of the changes that are already underway as a result of this work, and really making our work more impactful. Just real quickly, the blueprint is a high-level multi-year strategy to ensure the innovative and equitable engagement work by the department. It's really a guiding framework for our work as we support the work of both neighborhood organizations and also the city enterprise. It's data-driven, and we will measure our success based on the city's 8 diversity factors, which we're using currently for the city boards and commissions. Age, gender, disability, sexual orientation, renter-owner status, race, ethnicity, income, and formal education. So we've established benchmarks which are included in here to have a clear goal about what we're working on. Also, the blueprint includes some clear definitions about what we mean by engagement and equitable engagement, so that we found that through our feedback from working with the communities, just being really clear on this work. The blueprint is really grounded in the vision of achieving the One Minneapolis goal and what the role of the NCR department is in achieving that goal, and how our role is really to support the engagement of the community as we work on equity in our city and being able to make sure that the community voice is at the table. As I mentioned, a number of pieces of this are already underway. We've been implementing this somewhat as we've been developing it, but this is a consolidated plan which we are presenting to you today. With that, if I may, hand it over to the 2 staff to present the rest of the report.
Chair Gordon and council members, good afternoon, and I'm excited to be here again. My name is Ayanna Kennerly, and I'm the African American Community Specialist for NCR. So why do we need to do this? So the purpose is to build capacity for people to participate, ensure broad inclusion in decision-making, program development, and service delivery, and recruit, train, and appoint people of color, including people with disabilities, to neighborhood and city advisory boards to ensure accurate representation of the city's diverse communities. So as we all know, the city demographics are actually changing, and so we essentially need to make sure that all of the engagement strategies that we use are meaningful to communities and are ideas and strategies that communities would like us to use. And so some of the results that we're looking for are increased community capacity, transparency, and accountability, among other things.
So in our work, we use the IAP2 model. IAP2 is the International Association of Public Participation. It's one of those long acronyms, but it basically says that we should engage residents to the effect of how important is this to them? How much time do we have? How many resources do we have? We hear that people want to be engaged, but occasionally we also hear, hey, you're over-engaging us. So really paying attention to the spectrum. We also rely on IAP2 for their core principles of community engagement. We pay a lot of attention to this. We hope that you do as well. And in the beginning, we thought it was important to look and see where are we at right now so that we can hopefully see our progress. And this is from 2014. You can see that percentage of people of color on neighborhood boards, only about 17%, commissions, 16%, citywide, 40%. But by changing 1 or 2 people on each board, that graph looks a whole lot better. Now, this was from 2014. We'll be doing another boards and diversity and neighborhood survey in 2016, so we hope this looks a lot better come this fall.
So this slide captures the timeline that we use for the blueprint. So two things that I want to point out. Number one, again, we had two 45-day draft periods. And as David indicated earlier, the first comment period that we heard a lot of feedback that the document was not where it needed to be. So we heard that we needed to make the document less punitive and more collaborative. And then we also did not have as much representation as we would like from underrepresented communities. We had underrepresented individuals come to our meetings, but we certainly wanted to get more specific ideas of how they'd like to be engaged as we go forward as a department. So in the second comment period, one of the things that we did is we did a number of sessions specifically with cultural specific organizations, and we did a significant redraft of the document to take the feedback that we received from neighborhood organizations and residents in the city. And so the next slide actually shows a number of focus groups that we did. You can go to the next. And then lastly, this is the second wave of the focus groups that we did at the end of 2014.
So once again, the feedback we heard was that we should be more positive, we should be more collaborative, that we as a city should be a little bit more consistent in terms of how we engage with residents, that we should be more culturally sensitive, realizing that one size really doesn't fit all, and that we should find other avenues for people to be involved, maybe not just coming down to meetings or evening meetings or daytime meetings, but that festivals, events, and that there was a lot of things that we don't always value in terms of engagement, and that needs to change. So the blueprint has 5 main strategies. The first one is really working more with cultural communities, and again, appropriately so, supporting inclusive and vibrant neighborhood organizations, working better with our city, with our community partners, and also with our city departments. And in a few minutes, we'll talk a little bit more about things that we're starting to do to make those changes. And again, finally, evaluating and celebrating success.
So creative city making. So creative city making uses art, resources, and practices, design and test new interfaces between the city and community, and facilitates community engagement with new tools for engaging underrepresented communities. So for example, we use CCM as a tool to actually do engagement work. So again, the artists that we work with are D.A. Bullock and Araya Fine, and one of the things that they did was create a pulpit that actually community members helped them beautify, if you will. It was a number of youth members who helped them make the pulpit colorful. And so anyway, we took the pulpit around different areas of the city at events where residents were already there, and then got their input on a number of questions that relate to the blueprint. So one of the strategies that we have in the blueprint is actually to try new ideas. And so in doing so, having a pulpit where residents they feel comfortable going to the pulpit and answering the questions was a way that we help get feedback for the blueprint. And then another thing with the blueprint and the pulpit is that we were actually able to try an idea that residents had. So we heard from residents that they would like to use video as a way to give input as opposed to the standard attending a community meeting. So that's something new that we tried and something that we found very successful. And then we're going to show a quick video.
I would offer more jobs in the community. I would build more with our youth in our community so that youth can have places to go do fun things and not stand on the corner. So like a community center.
Yeah, along with my team, we help the department engage neighborhood organizations and other communities around the whole concept of developing the blueprint. Work we've been doing for a couple of years. It's real important that we get good input, do that community engagement to find out what people think, especially when working on decisions that may impact them. So that was my role, was to help with that. outreach?
I think that there's a lot of ways for people to get involved, but they feel a little bit secret. So I'm like you were just telling me about what is the Minneapolis committee?
NCR, Neighborhood and Community Relations.
Yeah, like I didn't even know that existed. So even like understanding that there's ways for people to get involved, that and having access towards those involvements, more tangible, easier to do.
I think the key important steps that I have been doing in relevance or that relates to the blueprint was reaching out to the East African communities in the city of Minneapolis and making sure that they have equal voice into contributing all the processes within the city level, making sure that they have some input into all the processes, whether it's coming from CBED, community planning and economic development, whether it's coming from public works, whether it's coming from some of the departments or something like that, making sure that their voices are heard, their voices are valued, and making sure that we create an environment where they can feel they have an equal voice.
And I would also put like a grocery store. We only have 2 grocery stores in this community. We need to get more grocery stores around here so people can eat healthy food, like fresh fruits and vegetables.
Well, I think having more representation from communities on a micro basis.
My name is Joel Martinez. I've been living in North Minneapolis since 2001. I'm a Northside resident. One of the biggest things that I'm an advocate is for just more activities for youth during the day and after the night. It seems like all the activities, recreational stuff, are usually in South Minneapolis and Northeast Minneapolis. A lot of there's no open gyms, there's no theaters, there's no things for youth. So I think that the lack of activity, there's more crime for youth to be involved.
So we needed the document because our department does community engagement work for the entire city, and we wanted to make sure that the community engagement work that we're doing actually reflects what residents want. So if we're doing community engagement work and it's not what residents want, then there's really no use of us doing it at all. So it's really important to us to work with culture-specific organizations, neighborhood organizations, and other trusted organizations throughout the city and understand what exactly are the ways that they'd like us to engage and make sure that we are doing that. And then in addition to doing that, when we have success, be able to tell other city departments, here's what's worked for us. Our residents told us this is what they wanted us to do, and we've had this level of success since then.
Emails are totally overwhelming, but that's a possibility. And I think it might be about visibility too. For example, I just took a little survey from, I think it was Knock, and it was all about like police in the neighborhood. And that got me thinking about, I see police all the time in their cars, but I never like talk to them. There's no real specific engagement. There's no like getting out of your car and being like, hey, I patrol this area.
An education system controlled by parents and students.
One-time grants to get people sort of over a hump.
I am Miss or Elder Naima Richmond. I'm known throughout the community as Miss Naima, Elder Naima, Mother Naima, and all of the above names.
And where are we? What neighborhood are we in?
We're in the Homewood area.
Which is in North Minneapolis?
North Minneapolis. Yeah. Beautiful North Minneapolis. I guess I have an issue when I do hear about things, I go to the table, but they come already with plans without my input. So you're saying I'm bringing this to you for you to approve, but I should have been at the table in the very beginning.
The creative means are really important, and working with artists is critical, and it's been critical. So just for example, using the equity pulpit that you and Araya were able to come up with the assistance with Juxta students. So being able to take something like that you can actually move in different pockets of the city, take it to an event where we typically wouldn't have access to those residents and get their input, it's huge.
I recently was hearing a gentleman talk, and he was talking about the housing disparity in Minneapolis and how crazy that is, and the idea of like affordable housing is really only affordable for those, you know, at a certain percentage of the median income in Minneapolis, which is fairly high. So what happens to all those folks that only make like $5,000 to $15,000 a year? Where do they live? Where can they go? And I think a more equitable Minneapolis would be to take those folks into account.
Chair Gordon and committee members, my name is Araya Fine. I'm one of two. DA Bullock couldn't be with us today, but he's the other creative city making artist that worked on this project. I think the video obviously largely speaks for itself, but wanted to just kind of highlight it was a tool that we put together in working with the department to really implement, show a model of implementation of what the blueprint really is about, right? So strategy one is about expanding engagement practices. And so this was a way of kind of thinking about really taking this right here, right? This podium pulpit here and this microphone and bringing it out to the community, because, you know, a lot of people can't make it to this space this time of day, or, you know, like, or don't feel comfortable. There's a lot of things. So we used the video is obviously edited, but each of those people that we talked to had this opportunity to give voice to their concerns, their interests, the things that they'd like to happen in the community. And so we had an opportunity over the course of the last year with the creative city making is to really create this as one tool, as one model of what public comment and engagement with residents could look like when you take, you know, the blueprint framework and think about how to creatively engage community. And so strategies 2 and 3 are about neighborhood organizations and about community partners. And what we were able to do is sort of provide a model. And so hopefully going forward, we're still kind of in talks about what it will look like. But this is the kind of tool that the pulpit that you saw on there is the kind of tool that we can bring out to community events, and did all last summer, but could make that available to the neighborhood organizations, to community partners, to really be able to engage more directly with community members in ways that are accessible to them, and are ways that brings right the conversations that you have in this space right out to the community, so that they can have a sense of how to engage and have voice in things that impact them. So I'll leave it there.
Councilmember Glidden has a comment or question.
Thanks very much. I might just start with a few questions. So I've been waiting actually for when we would hear some feedback on, and I guess this is sort of a bigger feedback piece on the blueprint for equitable engagement, but this is where we have this creative city making coming back. And I have been looking for when we might have some recommendations on how to utilize better throughout our enterprise or through the organizations we touch some of the creative city making ideas. And is there more that's going to come to us on this, or is this kind of where we take and we try to figure out where does it go? Because and it's interesting because Araya and I have actually had a one-on-one conversation about exactly this. You know, how do we take the work that's been piloted in multiple city departments, but then see how do we use that to broaden to recommendations that might affect the enterprise and be used in a variety of ways?
Chair Gordon and Council Vice President Glidden, excellent question. I know Gagoon is on vacation this week. She was planning on being here, but she is planning on coming back. I believe it's to the Committee of the Whole with a broader presentation around the Creative Cities Making project and its opportunities within the city. We wanted to move forward with what we were doing on our particular aspect and how we were utilizing it. And so I know there's another opportunity for the entire program to be presented to the council as a whole. What we're going to do with this, we did this as Araya was mentioning, we did this for a way to gather input into the actual development of the blueprint. And we received, this is an edited video, as you mentioned, but we received lots of comments from the pulpit that were included in our consideration. And so there's more like a raw video that really just comments coming in. But what we also decided as far as the department moving forward is that we're going to use this as a creative tool and make that available to neighborhood organizations with some criteria, where we're going to be looking for projects that are ready to go, how they would use video as a way to creatively engage people around a particular topic or subject that they're working on, and that they would be submitting those ideas to us and do that 2 or 3 times a year over the next couple of years to see how that actually, how effective that actually would be. So we are looking at moving this from just on the blueprint and then actually bringing that out to a tool to the community.
So, okay, so I'm looking at this page that has 5 items on it, Blueprint for Equitable Engagement Strategies, and I'm just trying to hone in on what's your recommendations so that I am a little bit more clear. And so these are your recommendations that are coming from this report?
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Glidden, what we landed on in this, our first report that we put out was really tactical, had a lot of details into there, and really we got a lot of feedback saying that that was just, it was too limiting because it didn't allow creativity. So what we landed on, this is intended to be a strategic plan, and so these are our 5 strategies over the next 5 years of areas that we're going to work in. In the actual document, it goes through a lot more detail about a little bit more on what those strategies will be. But yes, to answer your question, we are, in essence, the blueprint, the strategies that are identified, these are the strategies we'll be working on over the next 5 years to accomplish the goals that we've identified here. So that's it is our recommendation that we are moving forward with these strategies. That is correct.
Okay.
We do have some examples that we're going to go through of things that were actually, that are now underway that are a result of these strategies in order to accomplish our goals.
Okay. So I will tell you then, just maybe for next time, I'm really interested in this one that's item number 4, ensure city departments are well equipped to conduct effective public participation. This is one that's a pretty big challenge, just because, you know, there's a lot of limitations on the flexibility and, you know, kind of the creative mind energy that city staff has to put into the engagement piece when they're focusing on the more, what do I need to get done piece. I mean, just there's a lot of reasons for that, in addition to the issue of just sometimes, you know, we're challenged in trying to initiate enterprise objectives in a system that seems to favor a lot of discretion and, you know, that kind of thing for each department. And so I do think, though, that this is a really important initiative. I can tell you just from the very individual things that I've been working on in my ward, history, local designation projects, and on, just the expectations of the public today for what does engagement and seeking opinion and all of that look like are just different and higher. And if we're not able to satisfy the ability and the desire of residents to help lead, you know, how do we get from A to B, you know, we're just, again, we're really missing the boat on how does government, you know, keep in touch with the people we're really here to serve and represent and all that. So I think it's a challenge for a lot of reasons, but it's, I think, a very critical recommendation, and I'm here to help, but, you know, I'm also here to understand where you've gotten to with your team and making those recommendations.
Chair Gordon and Council Vice President Glidden, that area, I would say, is one of our most recent biggest successes. We have, in the last probably year, our work with other city departments has expanded considerably. If I have to say, one of my biggest kind of self-criticisms of the department is the first few years that we were up and running, we really focused in on building those external relationships with cultural communities and neighborhood organizations and establishing that credibility in the community, which I think was vitally important. But at the same time, we hadn't focused too much on the internal enterprise support. That in the last year has changed considerably, and now we are being pulled into a lot of different conversations. I see our role as being really consulting with other departments. The principles that the IAP2 principles that Stacy was referring to, we frequently will sit down with departments, walk through their engagement, what are they trying to achieve, what level of engagement are they looking at? Are they looking at co-creating something with the community? Are they looking to inform, and what have you? And that has proven to be very successful. There's more areas in the city to grow, and there's a lot of growth yet to be done there, but I would say there's significant progress, and some of the examples that they will go through in just a minute here will highlight a few of those.
So you all queued this up beautifully, because writing a plan is easy, but implementing a plan, that's where our work begins. So a few examples of the work we're doing with city departments include the workplace partnership support, which I know you're all extraordinarily familiar with, the MPD body camera discussions, community dialogues, where we take city staff out into the community and have them talk with community members at their location. Again, we're really trying to work with departments to plan ahead, to really pay attention to what community schedules are, not what our staff schedules, and to be more sensitive to the needs of communities. We're also working more closely than ever with neighborhood organizations, and again, doing some retooling in terms of how we do engagement. We've done a number of learning labs. The Immigration Affects Us All, that was such a great lab, especially because it was geared towards neighborhood organizations, but about half the people that came out on a cold night were city staff who came on their own time, who said, I need to know about this. This is important. We've also got some subject matter labs that we're doing more on tenant rights and responsibilities, when to use interpreters, and so on. So again, going a little bit further, David mentioned data-driven, taking a look at what measurements are there and what's appropriate measurements and how do people want to be engaged.
And so to continue on for current work, boards and commissions, so to diversify applicant pools and partner with community organizations to increase outreach to applicants. So we see our role is to get more residents to the table and then to support them when they get there. So making sure that residents understand that language should not be a barrier to participation. And if they are appointed to a board or commission, we can certainly provide translations and interpretations so that they can actively participate.
And I think this one's David's.
And then one of the other things as we were out, as I mentioned, our first few years in operation, we really focused in on building those external relationships and that credibility within the community, which I think was very effective. But one of the things that we were hearing was that, I think to Council Vice President Glidden's point there, was that we weren't necessarily crossing that work over good enough between the two, the body of work around neighborhood organizations and the cultural engagement work. And so that was a pretty clear message. So we looked at internally of how our department is actually organized, and we're reorganizing right now. We're doing a management reorganization. We've eliminated one of the management positions, so there's fewer managers in the department. Now there's two in addition to me. And the council just recently approved the deputy director position, and so the access and outreach team, which does most of our underengaged community outreach, as well as our neighborhood team, are being brought together under one. And so that they're going to create their business plan, they're going to create their work plans together. And so there's much stronger alignment. That work was occurring, but I think we're going to strengthen that by removing the structural barrier about bringing the work of the neighborhood and the cultural engagement work together and co-creating, in essence, the work plan for the city and to be more effective. So with that, that ends our presentation. I thought there was a question slide at the end there, so my apologies on that. Apparently it's not coming up, but that ends my presentation, or our presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Maybe we can have a little bit of discussion here on this. I think I'll just note that I think this could be one of the more significant pieces of work that the committee can even touch, and I do think there's an aspect, especially well, there's a couple different aspects. There's one where this work looks outward to the community over and over again, especially with the neighborhood organizations, and how can we do outreach to groups and entities and communities that aren't that well engaged. But there's also an inwardly facing piece about departments and expectations that they might have to work with the NCR better. So I think there could be a real role for the council to weigh in and have some input on this. So I'm looking forward to doing that over the next couple of weeks as well. But I think Councilmember Bender has some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate this work, and I think it's moving in the right direction. I do agree, though, that I would like to see as much specificity here as possible, and I think that partly has to come from more conversations with policymakers about where we want to land. I think, I've observed now that there's a lot of sort of inconsistency in the amount of engagement that we do on different projects through different departments. It's kind of an iterative process. It has a lot to do with the policy itself, if it's in a ward, which council member serves that ward. There's a lot of individual factors that go into deciding each piece. But I do think, I think it'd be nice if this document could help empower our staff across the enterprise to do, to both encourage folks to think about engagement differently, but also empower our staff to kind of determine their own recommendations for engagement. In order to kind of make sure we're reaching all of the constituencies, that we're providing factual information and making data-driven decisions as much as possible. So if there's a way for us to get to sort of more specificity in what we're sort of expecting from, and also empowering our staff and neighborhood organizations and boards and commissions and all of these other stakeholders that are really running the engagement for our city, I think that would be great. And it's maybe this whole task is a tall order. And so, I'd also like to offer my help in trying to make some specific recommendations about how we get there. The comprehensive plan is another big citywide, enterprise-wide engagement piece that I know you're involved in. And so just thinking about how this document could and is and would guide that work as an exercise is something I'm going to be doing, and think about if I can offer some concrete suggestions for how to get to more of that specificity.
Chair Gordon, if I may, if I understood your point there, we see our role as helping to support a more of a consistent engagement strategy across the board through the enterprise. It is, as Council Vice President Glidden was mentioning, it's a large enterprise and a lot of people moving in different directions. We are working very diligently and deliberately about trying to increase that uniformity about engagement. That's why we've adopted the IAP2 principles, which actually gives you a nice spectrum and allows people to really think through their engagement strategy about what is it they're trying to accomplish and think. And so we've been working more closely with a lot of departments on thinking that through and helping them in that process. We've also, we have done IAP2 training a couple times within the enterprise. We're looking at continuing to do that, and we've established accessibility network, basically, which is also around engagement and training staff within each of the departments. There's still a lot more work to be done in that particular area, but there's a number of things that we've implemented already to continue to build that foundation. I will say from the department standpoint, as this is rolled out in the enterprise, we are getting lots of demands from other departments to help them with this, which is great. And we're really busy on doing that. And some of the examples that came forward, even just the current one that's going on right now is the police body camera and working with the police department, which is a huge opportunity for us to build a stronger relationship with the police department as well. So we're working on supporting the enterprise more with building that more unified strategy. Again, there's more work to be done, but we're definitely moving in that direction. The plan is intended to be multi-year, and so we're looking at, trying to do this over a period of time. One of the things that I talked to Chair Gordon about was, and that we could talk before we come back at the next cycle or two, whether we have like an annual report coming back to the council reporting where we're at, what's been occurring, what are some of the benchmarks that we've achieved. Be happy to do that if the council feels that that would be relevant and helpful.
Okay, appreciate that. Do you have any further questions, Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one final comment. I think that's very helpful, and I particularly the trainings piece for staff. And I also think that to the extent that there are tools developed, it would be helpful to see them. And if that's a future task, I would wholeheartedly support us at least creating tools for department staff to use. I often observe that we aren't necessarily defining the goals of our community engagement and really understanding what we're asking questions about, what decision we're trying to inform. And I think even just sort of some simple questions or checklists or simple tools that staff could use as a baseline, of course, building on them or changing them as needed for their content. But I think that would be really helpful and continue to help kind of challenge all of us to think about, why are we doing this? What questions are we asking? Are we reaching the right people? Is this authentic engagement? Are we asking questions that are really informing policies, not just sort of checking off on a box? We held a meeting and asked people what they thought. So I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I also appreciate the work and the multiple rounds of going out to the community, get feedback that went into this, and the different drafts, and the NCEC, the commission weighing in on it. Appreciate that. And holding it over a little isn't to say that it didn't come to us in a great form either. I actually wholeheartedly embrace the 5 big strategies. I think there's more an interest in, okay, what can we get in under those strategies now to really strengthen them? And there might be some creative ideas or interesting ideas. I think your examples were really telling, that you picked out a few recent examples of when we maybe did community engagement a little more thoroughly or a little bit more robustly than we have in the past. And we're in the middle of the body camera one, of course, so we're right in the middle of that one. And I think if we also all thought about it, we'd look at some neighborhood organizations and we'd think, wow, that one really did a great process for that decision, or that one's fully functioning and healthy and others aren't. And so the idea is looking at what we think is working and works best and kind of raise the standards would be great, maybe even for all departments. And I don't know where the ideas will be or where they'll land, but I think there's a lot of them up here and even on the council. I appreciate the resource question and that, and it, I wonder if that could tie into the training idea, because if you could kind of take the expertise from your department or the templates you've developed and then get somebody from the other department to understand, then get that knowledge and be able to replicate it, that could really be powerful too. So we'll see. And what I'm hoping is in the next 4 weeks or so, we'll have a chance to look at these more as council offices and work with staff and maybe define some of the, I think you called them activities and almost the sub-strategies and what can we do, and come back with something that's just a little bit clearer and maybe Councilmember Bender said more details or specifics or that kind of stuff. So I'm very hopeful. Are there any other comments from anybody up here then? Well, I'm just going to, I guess I should probably move to postpone that 2 cycles then, and this will come back, and I'm encouraging staff and council members interested to set up meetings, and I'm happy to participate in those too. And maybe we can even create a little work group with some policy aides and council members and some of you to check in along the way to make sure that I'm not just punting this out and not taking my responsibility, because I want to get involved. All those in favor of postponing 2 cycles, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much for that report. And turns out our business here is not actually done yet. With that earlier amendment that I so awkwardly tried to get right, I think I failed to, because I think there was actually both resolutions that were referred to needed to be amended, and we only amended one. And I'm going to ask Attorney Trammell to guide us through what action we should take.
Chair Gordon and members of the committee, the amendment that you made would have been to Resolution 2015R-459, which is actually entitled Delegating Authority to Make and Execute City Commercial Garden Lease Form Contracts. That's the title of that resolution. The Community Garden Resolution is 2010R-119. And it reads a little bit differently, but it does have that same language at no cost to the city in it. So the motion to strike that language could still be made. There's one added complication of that particular motion, in that the former resolution from 2010 refers to City Charter Chapter 4, Section 25, which is no longer a valid reference. And although I've been sitting here and I've looked at the side-by-side comparison and it says that language was retained, I've been unable to find it in the time that we've been holding this meeting. So while I think you could move to strike that language, there may be further amendment needed. Either just to strike the authority part pursuant to City Charter Chapter 4, Section 25, because we do have City Council approved contracting policies, And such a lease would fall under those contracting policies that the city council has previously approved. So one solution would be to just strike also pursuant to city charter, chapter 4, section 25 from that prior resolution, which I believe the city clerk has forwarded to you.
Thank you. So I think, I guess there's a lot of steps that we could take to do that. Maybe we should just move to reconsider the previous action and get rid of that first. So could because we'll have to even fix the title. So why don't we, I'll move to reconsider the action that we just took. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now I will move to amend both the resolutions that were just referred to, and you have, everybody should have gotten in your inbox. There's the 2010 R-119, and that one you haven't? Oh, I thought I forwarded it to everybody. Maybe it's still sitting there waiting to be forwarded. Now everybody should have it again. Okay. Does everybody have that? Okay. And as the attorney recommends, we will strike the pursuant to city charter, chapter 4, section 25, and then we will probably have to make that T in the capital. So lowercase to uppercase. And then as written, striking at no cost to the city, and then also move to amend resolution 2015 R-459 with the correct title as printed in front of you, and to strike the at no cost to the city there. Is that motion clear? All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries, and you have my thanks and for all your patience with that, and we are now adjourned.